I think it's really important that we just keep you up to date on potential safety concerns on the job. Just like any type of technology or industry that, works with building materials, we're always going to find dangers and hazards that we didn't necessarily already know existed. And one of those things that is really kind of being highlighted right now in the industry and that we're talking about safety around is asbestos. Depending on the state that you live, there may be already some regulations coming down about what you need to do as far as materials you're going to demo, when they need to be demoed, and that type of thing. Those demoed materials need to be tested. And some states don't have any additional regulations on asbestos now than the standard regulations that if the house was built before 1980, then textured ceilings or drywall or those types of things need to be tested before they're demoed. But I had a really good discussion on one of my Thursday morning trainings about asbestos and just kind of the origin of it, what it is, what we should be careful about, and then kind of some of the industry standards and state regulations that are coming down. So watch that training. I hope you just get some good information, arm yourself with information that can keep you safe and away from hazardous materials. We are going to focus on asbestos. So we had a company it was last week because they finished up the job this week. And they had a home where it was drywall and then plaster was glued to the drywall on the ceiling. They glued it, but the house was older. And so condensation starts to build up. The plaster starts to weigh a little bit more. The glue dries out, that type of thing. The whole plaster ceiling just fell in. So they went to the job and it was like waist deep in insulation from that ceiling falling down. And we heard about this a couple days later. And I said to them, I said, well, are you waiting on asbestos test results? And they're like, oh, we didn't test for asbestos because the house was built in 1992. So we didn't test for asbestos. What are the alarm bells that are ringing right now for anybody?
I mean, just because it's a newer home doesn't mean it can't have it. The materials were still out there, so they were still being used, just not produced.
And that's an odd construction, though, for a 90s home to be plastered to a ceiling.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was the whole thing they said was strange, right? The construction of that home was just odd. So makes you wonder what else they did, right? First of all, like what else is going on in this home? But you're absolutely right. Just because a home was built in 1992 or 2012 does not mean that some of the materials may not have asbestos in them, right? Because by that time, the United States has said no more building materials can be manufactured with asbestos. However, materials can come in from other countries who don't have those same regulations, right? So we run into that all of the time. The main thing that we can say is it's okay if those building materials still contain asbestos as long as they're not disturbed, right? But once they're disturbed, or if we need to disturb them, then we have to make sure we're doing the right things. So let me jump on. What is asbestos? What is it?
A mineral.
It is a mineral. Excellent. Animal, vegetable, mineral, right? It's mineral. So it's a naturally made product. We find it in rock and soil. What are the benefits? Why are we even using asbestos? You thought this was a good idea.
Insulation, fireproofing, durability. It's one of the best building materials we've ever had, except it kills.
It absolutely is. It is. It's resistant to heat, right? And electricity. It's non-corrosive. Like, it's a natural material. Like, all of these things are telling us, wow, this is the duct tape of the construction industry, right? Like, it can do everything. Then we start to find out there are some health concerns, right? Cancer, mesothelioma, hardening of the lungs, all of these things. Because once asbestos becomes what's called frillable, it's a dust type particle that can be inhaled or ingested, and it gets into our respiratory system. Now we have issues, right? Okay, so in our building materials, where do we find it? What has it been used for?
Drywall mud.
Tiles, joist compound, fireproofing, adhesives, texturing.
Just about everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Insulation.
Yep. So right here, they're called ACMs, asbestos containing materials. You can see here all the different things that asbestos has been used for the manufacturing of, right? And you guys named just about all of these. One I like to point out is water tanks. Did you know that a lot of water tanks are manufactured with asbestos containing materials? That's one that you can think of. Baseboards, obviously, vinyl flooring, right? Soffit panels, any roofing materials, those types of things. So almost every part of the house it doesn't necessarily, but it could have asbestos containing materials. So it really is, our responsibility to make sure that we are testing when any of those materials are disturbed, or if we're going to have to disturb those materials during the mitigation process. So if I have a slow leak from a dishwasher, right? And so I've got some floor tiles, I've got some baseboards, those types of things. And then I look up and I've got a popcorn ceiling. Do I need to test the popcorn ceiling?
Not if you're not working on it.
Good. There you go. Right. So this is kind of a scare campaign about asbestos, but I want you to know we don't have to test everything. If we're not disturbing it, you don't have to test, right? But if it's been disturbed or we're going to disturb it, we do have to test for it. Okay. So now you're saying, great, Staci, 75%, that's just a number I'm throwing out. 75% of my jobs, have disturbed asbestos containing materials. I'm going to have to test for all of them. So I can't do anything until I get those test results. Is that a true statement?
No, it's situational.
Okay, tell me some things we can do.
Extraction, stabilization. If there are things like carpet that needs to get removed, we can take that out. The pad gets a little bit sketchy if you're worried about adhesives on the floor, so just the carpet. If you have a cabinet that you feel that you could take out without disturbing sheetrock, that if you have concerns about the sheetrock, you can do that. You can get all your content manipulation out of the way, you can treat with antimicrobial, a lot of stuff that you can do in pre-hand.
That's an excellent and not completely exhaustive, but almost list of everything we could start doing. What about drying? We've got extraction, that's going to cut down our drying times. Can I do anything with drying?
As long as none of the materials are disturbed, yes. But if there's a break in the sheetrock, then no.
Okay.
Or whatever material is that you're concerned about.
Good. Okay. So if the materials have not been disturbed, yes. If the materials possibly have been disturbed, we're going to hold off. Usually, I have a couple of recommendations here. You can place the dehumidifier. Right? And I would put the F9 justification note, indirect drying via heat, pending asbestos sampling and results. Then after those test results come back, I would have a new line item for the dehumidifier, right, post asbestos testing, so they can see, both things there. I wouldn't do it as one line item. I would do it as two, so the adjuster can see this is why we had it before testing, and this is now we have it after testing. But you can use dehumidifier, and justification can be indirect drying pending your asbestos results. Okay, another thing that you could use would be negative air.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that, but always, yeah.
Yep, you could definitely do your negative air. Your F9 justification is just improve air quality, IAQ during indirect drying, pending asbestos sampling and results. I would always put that pending asbestos sampling and results in that F9 justification. And then again, if you keep that negative air or, start to use it as an air scrubber or something after the results come back, just do a new line item that shows that being used after the asbestos sampling and results have come back. Any additional, these are just two that I think of and that we can generally use while we're waiting for our test results to come back. Anything else you guys can think of or think to add there? And then, of course, Tim went through everything we can do as far as extraction and content manipulation and everything else while we're waiting for results. But these are just two pieces of equipment you could use, pending the results for indirect drying and then also to improve air quality. Okay, I want to go back up here because I did not touch on this question right here, which is how is asbestos regulated? So first of all, according to OSHA, OSHA regulates that. They have the code of regulations. The EPA is the organization that puts together most of the training and the certification required to become certified for asbestos abatement, right? And then you have your state regulations. A lot of people think that the OSHA code of regulations and your state regulations match up. They don't always. Okay, so it's just important and almost more important that you spend the time to look through your state regulations and then see how it matches up with OSHA. Okay. All right, I'm going to go through this. Myth number one, if a home was built after 1986, asbestos testing is not required.
False.
That's false.
Absolutely. And we already talked about that a little bit, so I'm so glad. But contractors are required to have an asbestos inspection performed if they're disturbing any materials that may contain it. There is no reference to the age of the home in the OSHA regulation.
Really, then you should stabilize if you're going to do any demo and then have asbestos testing done.
Yes.
For every job.
If it is just an extraction job and you're going to dry everything in place.
Right. Yeah. Yes. But if you're doing any sort of demo, by the rule, you're supposed to asbestos.
Yeah.
What?
If a wall system or a drywall joint compound has less than 1% asbestos, then it doesn't need to be, I'm sorry, I missed my thing here. I've got a thing. 1% asbestos, then you do not need to be a licensed abatement company to remove it. True or false? Less than 1%.
I think that's true.
I think that is true.
Yeah, less than 1%?
Yeah.
I believe that's okay.
Okay. OSHA says that asbestos containing material is defined as material containing more than 1% asbestos by weight. So you're right. Per OSHA, that's true. But Utah regulation says that any material which has more than 0% asbestos must be removed by a licensed abatement professional. So this is that one, Tim, where we talked about whichever one is most stringent. And so here, Utah law, and you would have to look at your laws, right? Whether it it marries what OSHA says, or it kind of breaks from what OSHA says and has a more stringent standard. Myth 3, I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to say you're going to find a lot of labs in your area that are not necessarily accredited by OSHA or your state regulating body. Okay, we have one here in Utah. I'm just going to pull this up right here. It's Dixon Information Labs, right? It says it's an accredited laboratory. A lot of restoration companies in Utah were using it, and then come to find out it's not accredited by OSHA or the Division of Air Quality here in Utah. And so their results are not valid, and a lot of restoration companies were using them. So if you're going to start, or if you already are using an asbestos, laboratory or company, ask them the 2 questions. Are you accredited by OSHA, and do you meet the regulations for the regulatory body for the state? So don't mess around with it. Find a company you're comfortable with, know your state regulations, so that you can talk to adjusters. I know some owners have said that an adjuster will be like, why are you testing that for asbestos? This house was built in 2015, whatever. Just have your regulations ready so you can say, per the state regulations, we need to do it because of such and such, and you shouldn't have any problems with that.